Hello, thanks for joining me. I'm going to make this a quick demonstration of how you can deploy a Node Express app onto Heroku. So I'm already assuming you know how to build a basic Express app using Node and the ExpressJS package and whip together a basic HTML web page and serve that up with your Express app. So I'm going to move through that part rather quickly, and as soon as we have a basic landing page for the app, the next thing I'm going to go do is open up the Heroku command line tool and show how you can go ahead and deploy to Heroku. So some prerequisites are you already have your own Heroku account created, and you already have Node.js installed in your computer. You already have VS Code and are comfortable using these tools. And then from there, you can watch and see just how you can quickly go about creating an app on Heroku using the command line tool and uploading that. So those are the prerequisites. So I failed to mention, you also need to make sure that you have the Heroku CLI toolbelt application installed. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to just create a very basic, simple Node app right here on my desktop. So I'm going to just call this Express Heroku deploy demo. It's kind of a long name, but that's okay. And now I'm going to go ahead and right click on this and open this with code. Now, when you're using the Heroku command line tool, you're going to want to use Git to manage your version control by default. It makes things real easy. That's how I'm going to be doing here. There are other ways you can manage that, but by far the easiest way to do handle deploying to Heroku and handle your version control, I believe, is to use Git. So that's what I'm going to be using. So to get going here, let's go ahead and make first a server.js file. So I'm going to touch server.js. And I'm going to go ahead and run npm init-y, and that's going to create a package JSON, and this is just going to accept default values for my package JSON. I'm also going to create a gitignore file because I want to make sure that I don't track anything in node modules. So I'm going to add node modules. Also, if you're ever on a team, I don't use a Mac personally for my daily computer, but if you're ever on a team with Mac users, it's helpful to add this dsstore folder to your gitignore file. Other common files you may want to add, .env is always a good idea. You can always go to gitignore.io if you want to just grab like boilerplate gitignore files for just about any sort of development, whether you're working with Node, working with various platforms, mobile development. They have all kinds of templates on gitignore.io. All right, so now that I have a gitignore file with node modules, I have my initial package JSON here. I've got my basic server.js. Let's just console log hello. Let's go ahead and start setting things up. So let's get Express installed since I know I'm going to be using that. So I'm going to npm install Express on my command line. And then we're going to scaffold a very, very simple Express app just that says, hello world, basically a landing page. Let's pretend we're building a to-do app. I don't know. I recommend whenever possible, deploy as early as possible and often. So, as soon as you have just basically a landing page explaining what your app's going to be with like a little coming soon button on it or something like that, deploy and then go back to iterating on your app. The sooner you get deployed, the easier it is to find if any changes or modifications you're making as you build your app cause issues for your deployment solution. So let's go to ExpressJS and borrow a little bit of boilerplate code for getting started. So I'm going to go to I'm going to use the static middleware since I'm just going to serve a basic HTML page. So I'm going to go to the guide for that. If we go to static files, I think there's some boilerplate we can borrow there. Maybe, nope, maybe not. Let's just go back to basic routing then. I think that might, nope. Let's go to hello world. Simple enough. Great. So now I've got my Express app boilerplate. I'm just going to go paste that in on server.js and then format my code. I use Prettier code formatter. There's an extension for VS Code. Makes it rather easy. So I've got my Express app, Express import, creating my Express app variable for my port number, and then right now we just got app.getHelloWorld. So let's just give that a shot just to make sure it works. I'm going to go ahead and run node server.js, And now the app is listening on localhost 3000. I'm going to control click on that link, and there it is, hello world. Okay, great. I'm going to use the static middleware to serve my homepage, so I'm going to get rid of that route next and go ahead and say app.use, and then I'm going to use express.static middleware. And then for my root here, we're going to bring in the path module. So I need to import the path module, and I'm going to use that so that way I can get a dynamic absolute path to wherever I'm going to put my static files, and that way it works whether I'm running it locally in development on my computer, or when I deploy it'll work on Heroku, getting the absolute path to wherever Heroku stored it on its systems. So let's import path. It's a built-in Node module, so no need to install anything. And then to get the URL to, I'm going to make a folder called public in here to hold all my static assets. And so I'm going to say, I'm going to pass in path.join, and then I'm going to use the dir name global to get the absolute path to my server.js file. And then I need to join that to the relative path to my public folder where I'm going to put all my static assets. And then I'm going to also add some options because I like to use the extension option with Express Static Middleware. So here inside these pink curly brackets, and they're pink because I use another extension called Bracket Pair Colorizer 2. Right, so if you're wondering, my extensions that I've referred to so far, Prettier Code Formatter is what I use to format my JavaScript code, and I use Bracket Pair Colorizer 2, which just makes it easier to see pairs of opening and closing pairs of parentheses, curly brackets, square brackets. So let's go ahead and configure my options now, and what I like to do with the static middleware is automatically match files with the .html extension, so I don't have to actually specify that in my routes. So that's just something I like to do. I like to use with the Express Static Middleware. So now I just need to make a index.html file in public for now. So we'll say public index.html, and I'm just going to go ahead and use a simple bootstrap jumbotron for this for now. So let's go to getbootstrap.com. I'm going to just use Bootstrap from a CDN for now. So I'm going to copy that and paste the Bootstrap here. And we're going to say to-do app. Just pretend this is my initial landing page for my to-do app. And then I'm going to go grab a Jumbotron. I'm not going to include any of the JavaScript packages for Bootstrap because I'm just going to be using the Jumbotron and a little bit of grid. So we're going to go grab first a Jumbotron from Bootstrap. Grab a fluid Jumbotron, like it a little better. All right, and then we'll just say to-do app. Please check back in a few weeks. The best to-do list app you have ever seen will soon be available at this site. Thanks for dropping by. And obviously, for when you're first starting out an app, it's not a bad idea to include a link to, I don't know, if you're really in a hurry, a Google form or some place where somebody can sign up for email notifications, so that way you can get the word out to anybody who's interested when your app finally goes live. But it's basically a nice little coming soon page about the app that is going to eventually be here. Just kind of pretending right now, mostly for the sake of demonstration. So let's go ahead and restart our server. And if you find it tedious to keep restarting your server every time you make changes or whatever, I really like to use, just as a quick fix, there's a lot of ways to handle this, but an easy way to get going is to install a package called Nodemon, so npm and I'm going to make it a development dependency. You shouldn't use Nodemon as your way of serving up your content ever. It's a development tool. So I'm going to use the -d flag with npm to mark it as a development dependency. And we're going to install Nodemon. And that's going to go ahead and download Nodemon and stash it in my Node modules folder. There we go. And now I'm going to go to my package.json and go add a script to make it easy to start Nodemon. And so what Nodemon does is it watches your files for changes. So anytime if I use Nodemon instead of Node to launch server.js, for instance, if I save changes to server.js or any of its descendant dependencies, Nodemon will go ahead and restart my server app, and that just saves you a bunch of time, saves you the trouble of going to your terminal, killing the process, and restarting it every time you want to check or test something you've been working on. So let's go ahead and finish adding this command here in package.json. So I added a watch script, and I'm going to say Nodemon server.js, and that's an easy way to get that going. And now I can run my development server with npm run watch command in the terminal. And now I can rapidly have my server restart anytime I make changes. So I'm going to go back to my browser. Let's refresh the page, and there we go. There's our to-do app. Please check back in a few weeks. The best to-do list app you've ever seen will soon be available at the site. Thanks for dropping by. Perfect. I know it's not pretty. That's all I want for right now. Again, just trying to do a quick demo here. All right, so I've got my web page. I've got my server. It's time to start setting things up so that way I can deploy it on Heroku. So I'm going to go ahead and make a commit here. We're going to get add dot. Oops, I got to get init first, my bad. So now I've initialized git. I'm going to go ahead and git add, git add -a, and that's just going to stage all my everything I've done so far, and then git commit, and we'll just say initial server with a landing page. There we go. All right, awesome. So now it's time to configure just a few things in the app so that way it will work once deployed on Heroku. The first thing we're going to go deal with is in server.js. So when you deploy on Heroku and many other platforms out there for hosting your site, when you use it as a platform as a service, the port you're going to be using is going to be dynamic, and it's going to be assigned by the platform, usually available as an environmental variable. So in Node, if you need access to the environment and the environmental variables, you do so using the global process object. So I'm going to say process, and then I'm going to access the .env property of process, which is going to be an object that has various environmental variables set on it. So I'm going to get process.env.port. And then I'm going to use some syntax in Node, which is a short circuit. So basically what I'm saying here is if port is falsy, so any of the falsy values, 0, undefined, null, etc., then go ahead and fall back to using 3000. However, if I have an environmental variable for port that is not falsy, so for instance a port number, or a string with a number assigned by Heroku or wherever I'm deploying, then instead of 3000, I'm going to use that port number. And so we need to make sure we do that because very, very likely that Heroku isn't going to let my app listen for requests on port 3000. That will probably not be an option. So we want to make sure we get the port that Heroku hands down into our Node app. Okay, so now that we've set up the port number, the only other thing I need to do, right, I know it works, I've got routes that work. The only other thing I want to make sure I have is in package.json. I need to make sure a couple of things are in place. First off, got to have a start script, got to have main in the package.json because Heroku is going to use start after it's done building the app. So you want to make sure you have that. You want to make sure that all your dependencies required for the app are listed. Otherwise, during the build step, which runs automatically, when you deploy a Node app to Heroku, it'll automatically call npm run install and npm install, and so you want to make sure that all the correct dependencies are listed in your package.json. The other thing that you may want to enter is if you go to the Heroku deploying Node guide, getting started in Heroku with Node. There is another thing that you can do, which is, where is it at? Setup, where is it at? Prepare the app, I think. And I recommend take a look at this guide for yourself and go through it. There's a lot of useful information, but there should be an option. I just want to make sure I get it right off the top of my head, but you can include, I believe the property in your package.json is called engine. And that just tells, you can provide like versioning information about what version of Node your app needs to run. Where is it at? All right, well, you don't need it for your app to work, but it's recommended. I don't want to take the time to look it up right now, so I'll leave that to you. We already have the bare minimum in place to deploy our app, so I'm just going to move forward from there. The other thing you're going to need to, if you're following along, so for the next step, I'm going to be using the Heroku command line tool. So if we go to introduction or setup here, you can download the app. You can find it right here, or I mean, if you just use Google or search engine to search for Heroku CLI, and you can get straight to an installer for that. You also need to make sure you have Git installed already. So you can see here if you want to use Brew on a Mac, or you can download the installer for Windows. Make sure that's all installed first. And once you have the command line tool installed, you're ready to follow along with me. So all we need to do now is use a couple commands. So I can run from within. You got to make sure that you're within your project repo. So I generally recommend being at the root folder for your project. And then what you can do is run Heroku Create. And what that's going to do is it's going to provision a new Heroku app in your account. And then it's also going to set up a remote for your Git repo named Heroku. And that whenever you push changes, new commits to the master branch of that remote, that will trigger Heroku to go through the whole process of shutting down the app, running build, running install, running build, and then starting the app back up. So if you want to just run Heroku Create, you'll get some random name for your app assigned to you by Heroku. You can try to provide your own name for your app. If you, after Heroku Create, include an app name, just keep in mind that that app name needs to be unique. So I usually, anytime I know I'm going to delete an app because I'm building it for a demo like we're doing right here, I always start with temp. It just makes it easy for me to go find it. So that's why I'm prefixing it with temp. You don't need to do that, obviously. So I'm going to do temp, and then we'll just say, I don't know, to do app demo to give it a name, and hopefully that's unique. All right, great, it worked. So Heroku's created my app. It's not deployed yet, and it's going to deploy my app at this URL right here. So if we wanted to, I could copy this, and let's make a new README file, and I could say something like to do app demo on Heroku. You can see this page live at, and then we just paste that in there just to hang on to the link. So now that that's done, let's commit that README, git add README, git commit. I'll give it a message by providing the -m option here and say add README with link to Heroku app. Okay. So we're ready to deploy. That's pretty much it. I do need to make sure I commit because I did change this line of code here at line 5. So let's git add server and then git commit server gets port from env. There we go. All right, so all my changes are committed. I am ready to deploy. If we look, you don't have to do this command, but just to show you, if I sorry, headset just shut off there. Had to flip it back on. So if I do git remote -v, which is a git command that lists all your remotes, we can see that when I ran Heroku Create, it actually initialized a new remote named Heroku in my git. So to deploy, all I need to do is git push Heroku master, like so. And that's going to go ahead, and now we can see in my log right now, Heroku is running the install and the build process. The build succeeded. We're just watching the console scroll along, waiting for it to complete, and now it's done. Awesome. So I can, if I want to open my app, I can easily just say, I mean, we can see right here the URL to the app is right here. So I could just control click on that, but anytime you're in a Heroku app, you can just say Heroku open, and that's going to open that app up in Heroku. There you go. I hope you found this helpful. I guess I'll throw in a little extra here. If you ever are having trouble with your deployment, something's going wrong and it's throwing errors, you can use the Heroku command line tool to see those errors by typing in the command Heroku logs and then include --tail, and that's just going to keep the line of communication open to keep receiving log messages as they come in. So I can look back, and if an error had occurred, I'd be able to see that here in the logs. So that can be helpful if you're trying to debug anything going on in your deployed app. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you found this in any way helpful, please hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next video.